All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us in today's session from Antares on the Digital Transformation webinar series. Today we are talking all things AI, and in particular AI made accessible, in particular transforming the NFP sector. So joining me today, we have Dean Corker, the Technology Strategist and CTO for Partners at Microsoft. Also bringing in the business lens view from Peter Smith, CEO for Mission Australia. Over the course of the next hour, we'll discuss all things ranging from successful implementation of AI, some of the product developments and enhancements which is driving the push from Microsoft and what they're seeing in the actual statistics of markets that's leading to this change. And as we're all aware, with AI becoming more mainstream and more of the conversation, particularly over the last 6 to 12 months, going to be some key insights and key things to take away from this session. And as we do this as well, we're going to have a moderator online. So if you've got questions, pop them in the chat window and we'll give you some real-time answers. And at the end of the session, we'll also look to pick up some of those questions. If we've not covered any topics that you're particularly interested in as well, let us know and pop in the chat window, and we'll also look to pick that up as well, making sure we're going to cover a lot. There's a broad range of areas and topics to cover in this space. So we'll do our best to make sure that you walk away from this session with a good understanding of the space, get some industry thoughts, some real world application thoughts from people like Peter on the ground who are delivering solutions, and also help you go forward with a better understanding of this space. So that's enough from me for the moment. I'll throw over to Dean, who joins us from Microsoft, to go through a little bit more about the AI space and how it's emerging from Microsoft's lens.
Great. Thank you very much, Greg, and thanks for that introduction. Yeah, so look, I thought I might sort of just kick off with just a couple of little slides to sort of introduce some of the concept. Look, I'm going to make no assumptions about what everybody on the call knows and how you sort of got to here. There's definitely a lot of chatter out there about AI. There's sensationalized things, and there's things that are very pragmatic and based on reality. And here at Microsoft, as a CTO for Partners and Technology Strategist, it's my role to look at any emerging technology or any existing technology for that matter and see how organizations of all shapes and sizes, and also consumers and people and citizens, can benefit from that technology to help them see new opportunities and new potential and get through life with better experiences, and to help them eliminate sort of challenges that they have as well. But with that also comes, challenges with the technology and the technology adoption. And I think, by the end of this, if I sort of think about where we might end up going with the conversation, I think that a lot of the challenge is going to be, excuse me, probably more with the human factor than it is with the technology factor. So if I sort of look at things from the perspective of what's really happened over the last 9 months, there's been, AI is not new, and that's a common thing you hear. It's not new from the perspective of a technology that people are playing with and researching. But what has changed really is two main things in the last few years, and particularly in the last year. So over the last, would say probably 10 years, technology generally and compute power, the things that artificial intelligence and associated technologies and machine learning technologies typically require to work well, large amounts of compute, a large amount of storage has become very accessible, largely through the adoption of cloud technology. And that's driven a lot of innovation in machine learning and what we might refer to as sort of conventional AI. But what we've seen in the last year is a new type of AI referred to as generative AI. And whilst even generative AI is not entirely new, in the last 12 months, the thing that was new was the innovation around introducing the ability to interact with this generative AI. So generative AI, I'll define in a little bit more detail in a moment as we get into it, but largely what we've seen in the last 12 months has really been this emergence of this accessibility through a natural interaction with the technology, this chat functionality, or the chat GPT, that has become something that's a household name. And so if we sort of look at what's happening in the media, but this is not something I'll drill down on in detail when it comes to general public and consumer perception of AI. What we're really seeing is the media, students, grandparents, kids, middle-aged people, all shapes and sizes. This is both a boardroom conversation and it's a household conversation right now. And that's because it is a very accessible technology and it interacts with humans in a way that humans typically appreciate or can resonate with, which is quite different to the type of technology I grew up with. If we have a look at what you're seeing on the screen here is a question of, how smart, and smart, I suppose we should really predefine as well, but how smart is ChatGPT? And what we see on the screen is a sort of percentiles for measuring a number of different standard examinations that people use within industry. And if we use, in this instance, the standard bar exam, which is used in law, the innovation that we've seen over the last 12 months, even in ChatGPT, has been quite profound in that the previous version of ChatGPT passed the bar exam in the 10th percentile, but I don't think it even did pass in that instance. But in the next version of ChatGPT, ChatGPT-4, it was able to pass at the 90th percentile mark. And so it's above average when it comes to the way that we normally assess the way that we normally assess humans in doing particular tasks, which doesn't necessarily mean it's smart. It doesn't necessarily mean it's intelligent from a conventional general sense, but it means that there's a number of metrics that we use in our society today that are changing, and that can be quite powerful. And before I sort of pass over and get some thoughts from Peter, I'd just like to sort of clarify, where ChatGPT came from. So ChatGPT is something that is an innovation thought up and built and made accessible by an organization known as OpenAI. And OpenAI have always had this mission to make artificial intelligence technology something that humanity can benefit from. And that resonates quite closely with Microsoft's core mission. And so Microsoft is an organization that has invested in OpenAI to give them the computing and cloud resources they need to continue to do their research and see what the potential is and what the challenges are. And we invest by providing them with those technology capabilities, but also invest as a financial investor in that organization as well. The return we get is that we make the technology more accessible to organizations that use Microsoft technology. And so what you're going to see over the coming months, even now or next month, is integration of conversational technology in everything that you would traditionally see as a Microsoft technology, everything from PowerPoint, Outlook, Excel, right through to cloud technologies and Microsoft 365 will have a conversational experience that unlocks more capability and sort of effectively removes knowledge from you of having to know where the buttons are to do things. But with that, I'd like to sort of pass over to Peter to give us some insight in Peter's journey with generative AI. You're on mute, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. I think our journey started really with the understanding that many of our tools were already using AI in various ways, shapes, and forms. Particularly, it started off with the security tools, but you're seeing it bleed into a whole range of tools across our suite. Things like ServiceNow, was already injecting AI and machine learning and some components into what it did. So it became more and more important for us to understand what our tools are doing. So, which tools are using AI, how are they using it, where's that information coming from, where's that information stored? Because we need to, there's a number of aspects to this. We need to make sure it's secure. We need to make sure that we're not breaching other people's IP if we can. We need to make sure that the decisions or the recommendations that are being made are understandable and we can overlay the ethical lenses across it. But also what we're finding is that there's an incredible amount of, I think, of improvements in user experience, employee experience, and potentially customer or client experience that will come out of these tools. There'll be an incredible amount of security depth and strength that comes out of these tools. There'll also be an increasing efficiency that comes out of these tools. And so we've really got to embrace it and understand it from the full depth. So understanding, where it's coming from, what it's doing, who's using it, how it's being used, so that we can protect the business, but at the same time leverage the tools. And I think that's the journey we're on at the moment. We're playing around with it in a number of different areas. We've had it forced on us in a number of different areas, and we just need to make sure we understand, how it's being used, and we leverage it where we can. And in some cases, we may have to say no. We're we're not going to use it. We're going to stop it, or we're going to ring fence it so we can protect ourselves from it. But we've got to take an active role in it. We can't just be passive players in that space.
Very interesting snapshot there, Peter. Thanks for that. I think that's one of the key sort of questions I'll probably put back to you, Dean, as well, around, Peter touched on it, the ethical controls and the ethical, tooling, and from a product standpoint, how does Microsoft's posture in that space look from, your context of what you're seeing and the advancements in the development coming out, to ensure that, the ethical responsibility controls and frameworks are there?
Yeah, look, absolutely. Oh, sorry, Greg. What was...
Yeah,
sorry. Yeah, so look, Microsoft has had ethics committee for all technology, and generally Microsoft as an organisation looks at not only what Microsoft does about how we build technology and make it available for our customers and other organisations, but also look at it from the perspective of how we help organisations who are using the tools create a perspective. And so I might even just sort of flick around a little bit in some of the materials here. So the Microsoft has principles around, when we're building any sort of novel technology, is it going to have aspects of its use or aspects that emerge from it that affect fairness and equality? Is it going to be safe and reliable sort of technology? Is the use of it itself could create a dangerous situation? Is it going to compromise privacy or security of organisations and people? And of course, it doesn't include everyone in the journey of benefiting, right? And importantly, how transparent is Microsoft and how the technology works? And so some of these technologies as being inferred, they seem like a bit of a black box, but I sort of look at that philosophically and say, well, how much do you know how your colleagues work on a daily basis, right? It takes time to get trust. And if we don't all have sort of transparent minds, we don't always have insight into what everyone is thinking and what their motivations are. But what we do have, with these quite complex models is effectively, no one person understands exactly what's going on. But to have at least a high-level understanding of how they work and how they come to their conclusions, predictable or otherwise, is important. And so you've got to look at every new tool as something that has benefits and things that has challenges and weigh those up. And some of that tooling, wrong way. I've went the wrong way with that one. Sorry. Here we go. To give you some idea that we provide guidance around the types of mitigation mechanisms we use. And some of the mitigation mechanisms we use are actually technologically driven. And so if you use Bing Chat, for example, which is basically a search based on ChatGPT, what it does is it provides an answer, but before the human sees the answer, we get another AI to check whether or not the response is something that we think is, for lack of a better word, generally savoury. Okay, is that response, regardless of what question's been asked by the user, by the individual, has the responses come back exhibited something which violates Microsoft values and principles of responsible AI? And so if you've ever used Bing Chat or ChatGPT and you've seen it start to attract a response, some of you may have seen that before, or suddenly it just goes, sorry, I'm ending this connection. That's because there's another AI that said, that doesn't look good, we're stopping it right now.
Perfect. Thanks, Dean. And I think there's also a need to consider your organisational factors in there as well. So along with the Microsoft's investment and also the mitigation mechanisms, It's also around your own security posture too as well. I know there's been a lot of work done with organisations such as CSIRO and Standards Australia around what does ethical framework and policies look like. So, it is very organisational specific, and it probably leads me to my next question to Peter around, how can NFP organisations effectively align their business strategies with AI? So when we look at real world implementation, how do you bring that together, Peter, and bring that to align with strategy from the C-suite?
I mean, from my perspective, I think you probably phrased it a little bit backwards. So from my perspective, I'm looking to where AI can help support and drive the business strategy. And I think particularly in places like employee experience and efficiencies, that's where it helps drive it. We've got a project at the moment where we're looking to we've got to extract a whole lot of requirements from our contracts for our backup and data retention pieces. Now we've got 500 or 600 contracts in there, all with different clauses in. The time it would take to get people to read through that and understand it and build the requirements is huge. So the ability to be able to extract that in a controlled environment and generate the requirements and then run through those generated requirements is huge. The efficiency it creates is huge. And so you start slow and you start with those sorts of simple use cases where you look at doing things that you can create efficiencies through, and then you start repeating those. And as you build up the skills, and I think this is the challenge that we're all going to have, is building up the skills. As we build up those skills, leveraging our partners, but also us understanding it, we're going to find more and more use cases where we're going to use it. Using it to create. I was talking to someone today, using it to search our policies. So someone said to me, why don't we just create a nice, good catalogue structure for the policies? But we've got 300 policies. So if someone's looking for the impact of privacy across 300 policies, that's you'll never get it. But if you actually can use AI and the search tools or chat tools to be able to say, show me all the policy references to privacy, that's going to provide that result inherently quickly, but also more complete. And so those sorts of things will significantly enhance our efficiency, but also improve the ability to be able to get the information that people need when they need it in a complete format. And think about context and things like that as well, because it's not just matching words these days, it's actually looking at context and meaning and understanding in it as well. And that's where the value, from my perspective, really starts to drive up. And we've just got to learn how to build and scale.
Very, very good insights, Peter. And probably over to you, Dean, in terms of what you're seeing from examples of how AI is resulting in measurable improvements for business and ROI, and what are leaders thinking around the reasons for implementing AI. Peter's given us a good insight in terms of how he's viewing that. What are the sort of driving metrics and I suppose reasons behind businesses, and especially NFPs, what they gain from the implementation?
Yeah, definitely, and that's why I've sort of, as Peter was speaking there, it resonated quite closely with that sort of the digital debt image that I've got in front of everyone right now. If you look at most people's roles, if you sort of balance it between just using the tools, communication tools, using Office Teams or other tools that you're using to be collaborative. There's using the tools, and then there's actually doing the creation side. You could sort of say the creation side is actually your proactivity. You're actually doing something for the business. You're creating content. You're creating, responding to needs of society or otherwise. And so we see that as time's moved on, there's more communication, there's more tooling, and that has created a lot of efficiencies. We're more productive than ever, but we're sort of getting bogged down at the same rate. So there's a bit of a feedback loop happening there. And so that's what we're seeing. That's from the recent Work Trend Index 2023, earlier this year, that done. There's a lot more that goes into AI aspects as well. And so I think you asked a few sort of different things there, Greg. I might sort of go a little bit more illustrative actually and show, how, the Copilot technology sort of works in a team scenario. This is just a recording for simplicity here. Where if for those who are using Teams, or you might be using Zoom, or you could be using some other collaboration technology, if you can sort of think of an interaction where you've missed a meeting or there's been a meeting, and you think of that in this sort of context of AI, where you sort of, and this might not be specifically NFP specific, but in this case, we're asking, did anything happen with this organisation in the last day or so, right? And so AI is going out and having a look at, and this could equally be, someone that you're working with, another organisation. You're asking about a context that could be quite specific to your organisation and what you're trying to achieve. In this case, it's saying, there was a meeting that happened. Here's a summary of the meeting. Here's some documents that related back to the meeting. And so if you've got another, meeting or interaction coming up during the day and you need some preparation, then you can ask the AI to not only give you a high-level outline of some of the things to talk about that are going to be important, but it can potentially go and then create a slide deck or other assets that can be very, very useful and help you prioritize and be more productive. And so if I sort of think, if I get asked a question, and I get asked hundreds of questions every day, being able to sort of respond to that much quicker and then double check that everything is right, and then get to being more productive again, that's very, very useful. And so we see that also. And this is, whilst Copilot AI, generative AI technology being embedded into Teams, embedded into Office is cool, and it's coming soon, sort of getting to the heart of actual sort of statistics, I suppose. What we have actually got a case of us using AI for the last year. For the last few years, and that is with developers. This is very techy, of course. Developers using something called GitHub, and some of you might have heard of GitHub before, have been using Copilot to create code for them. And those who are using the code are much, much more productive. Those who are using Copilot for producing code are much, much more productive. And some of the organizations I've worked with have sort of said they no longer type any code without first asking the AI the way it would do it. And to be fair, sometimes they go, no, that's just rubbish, I wouldn't do it that way. And in other cases, they go, that's pretty good, I just need to make a few modifications and I'm done. And so it really cuts through a lot of grind in sort of getting results fast, or at least getting started. I remember there's sort of a famous sort of inspirational sort of quote that says, the secret of getting ahead is getting started. And sometimes just having an AI assistant say, how should I do this, is really useful. There's another thing you mentioned as well, Greg, around sort of policy. As far as I know, with government recently, they believe that there was a discussion on whether or not government was to introduce a specific policy around regulating AI. And they believe that the current laws and systems in place at the moment, if you just remove AI from the equation and think about what's actually happened, the current opinion is that the existing laws and regulations are sufficient to deal with that. But that doesn't mean that there isn't going to be something new around the corner where the government thinks again and says, this is something we've got to look at a bit deeper. So I think that covered some of your questions.
Yep, no, perfect. That's great insight, Dean, and thank you very much for that. And I think if we all think about it as an audience and as doing our own day jobs, when we start talking about, Dean's example there of, developers having, code versions was provided for them by Copilot, if we all thought about how easy it would be if we had an automated assistant that was drafting our emails, that was preparing documentation or presentations for us, and all we had to do was review it. Life would be a lot simpler if all we were doing was casting our eye over and making final edits, as opposed to coming up with the bulk of the content ourselves. Now, as sort of Dean said, it's important to keep an eye on what's being produced, because not everything will be perfect. But when we start to think about the opportunity space here and how, generative AI will really start to leverage that efficiency, we can see, where that is in the context of your example. And I think, that's probably highlighted what Dean's got on screen as well around, using AI to do better, to do faster, to do more tasks. And I think that's the productivity sort of end game that we see in that space.
And just to add to that as well, like this Financial Review article, that's just from, I think it was last week or the week before, a few weeks ago. It's, this is in the first year of people starting to access this technology a lot more. So what we're going to see is people learning how to use this new tool and learn how to use it better. Just like most people on the call would be quite adept with knowing the best way to search a search engine, Google, Bing, or DuckDuckGo, whatever it is that you might use. People are going to learn how to use this new tool in time to get to the result they want a lot quicker as well.
Very interesting point. I think that's a key one, and I think while we touched on the ethical dilemmas, it would be good, Peter, to sort of maybe get a bit of a view around, what are the things that you see as from your role at Mission Australia around, the ethical dilemmas and I suppose areas you're putting under consideration when it comes to adopting AI.
Yeah, I think this is probably the key part that we need to work through better and keep working through, because I think that it's an ever evolving piece, and it's going to continue to evolve for quite a long time. And I think the challenge for us is to say, for some workers, we're going to put guardrails up that they can't go outside. For other workers, we're going to give them a bit more leeway because they have a deeper, a more sophisticated level of knowledge around the information. We have to have the conversation with the board and the executive around, what are some of the risks that are here. We have to make sure that our risk profiles are established to ensure that we understand where it could be. Certainly our initial policy that's going out shortly, it just talks around the fact that, don't put anything that's confidential into ChatGPT, because obviously it's going out into the market, into the ether, and it's completely discoverable in other models. But obviously we want to be able to create internal models that allow us to safely explore these tools inside our Microsoft environment or inside our environments. And I think that it's about creating those guardrails and creating the understanding, and then continually building up the skill set. So I just had a conversation this morning with some of my senior managers around what are we going to do as senior managers and to continually deepen our knowledge in these spaces, not necessarily from a technical level per se, more so from a broader, business understanding, risk, ethical, all those factor levels, and how we're going to understand use cases, and so we can better leverage it to support the business, particularly around that employee experience and around efficiencies, because that's where I think the initial gains are going to be really, really powerful. But then how do we actually, as we mature it, build it out so that we're saying we've got data that's longitudinal, so we might be doing a whole lot of research. Now, how do we create tools that help our caseworkers to leverage all that longitudinal data when they're actually potentially supporting clients and looking for cues as to what might be an ongoing concern? Or how do we provide research that allows us to challenge models? All those things that are coming up that are a little bit too far out in the future yet, but that they're going to develop, and that a lot of these tools are going to, I think are going to wrap around use cases and combine with things like wearables and deep data sets to create more use cases. Now, that might be 3 or 4 or 5 years away, but that's where it's going to be going. I mean, the health sector itself are already exploring wearables in a big way. They're exploring much deeper use of AI and machine learning when it comes to diagnostics. So you can see that convergence of those pieces coming. And for people like NFPs, we're community services. We do mental health and housing and domestic violence and alcohol and other drugs and all sorts of things. You can see that becoming useful, but we've got to find the right point where it's economically viable. It's safe enough to use. It's not going to put us in ethical breaches or data breaches, etc. But we can actually start to explore it. So it's a medium to longer term play, but it's important that we start using it now.
That's a fantastic insight, Peter. And do you see, and I'll unpack that answer a little bit, do you see that there is the need for an AI governance board or a committee in terms of, an oversight, similar to what happened with the data and the expansion of data and the way the data world took off and sort of said, now we need data stewards and we need data governance and we need these sort of types of roles in an organisation? Are you seeing that that's going to be the type of thought processes you ideate around as you look ahead around how to, have the right people and structures in place to keep an eye on it and assess?
Yeah, I think the decision is work. The jury's out on the decision quite yet, but I think whether it sits within the data governance groups and looks in that space, or whether it sits in some of the risk risk groups, risk and security groups, or whether it sits in all three and there's an oversight of that. I think that's what we're trying to work through and consider. And I don't think we're quite at the space to make that call yet, but I can see that coming out of it. That there is that definite need to consider, the broader perspective as well as the individual components of it.
Awesome. That's very good. And maybe thoughts from yourself, Dean, around what you see out there in terms of inputs around the organisational adoption and the use of co-pilots as it comes to NFP.
Yeah, look, it's a really good I think as far as actionable type things that will start to move towards the end. It's definitely high on the agenda is getting governance in place, in particular around data. So these tools work best when, especially Copilot type conversational AI, and there's other types of AI that we could go down into as well that I hope people sort of go back to look across the whole NFP experience of what you're actually what your organization's about, right? And so it's not just one part of it is the workers being more productive, but there's also how do you become more functional as a overall organization. But coming back from that and not diverging too far, back to the root of the question, the generative AI tooling works best when it has a lot of connections, just like the way that, and I don't want to stretch the metaphor too far because I don't want to create a perception of some sort of sentience here, but think of what a new worker needs within an organization. They need access to the way the organization works, the policies, the operations, things like that. They need to know where the data is or where resources are that they can then use to independently come up with ways to work more productively and things like that. And so if you think of that in a digital landscape point of view, that's access to the customer data or the community data that you're working with. It's access to the processes and tools. It's access to other people. And so that's what AI needs as well. Now, the thing that is going to bite organizations very quickly is because we can deal with this because you can interact with it in a very accessible way, you can just converse with it, then if the AI has access to something that the person shouldn't have access to, it may emerge in the generation that is presented to the user. And so that could be financial information or something like that. And so traditionally, humans just wouldn't go to that place where it is. And so that even though they have access to it, they don't know they have access, and their daily flow doesn't put them in proximity to it. And so it's sort of security through obscurity, right? Is really, or security through habits, not forging bad outcomes. But the difference with AI is if you ask a question of the AI, you say, create me a presentation to this organization we'd like to work with because we think that we can help with real physical world accessibility scenarios, and create the presentation, and it goes and then includes some confidential information from another organization in there. Then there's two things there. The human should be looking at what was produced before they show it to the client. And so yes, you need supervision, and that is absolutely apparent with this. This is an augmentation tool. It's not a replacement tool. And that's so if anyone's worried about their jobs, this is augmentation. It's you being better. And all our research shows that even employers don't want to replace people. Generally speaking, what they want them to be more productive. And the second one is that making sure that what the human has access to when they're using the AI is that the AI gets the same access control. So as Dean asked the AI a question, the AI only has access to what Dean has access to, which means going and having a look at get governance across all your knowledge base to ensure that that is well coordinated as you turn these things on. And we've got, a number of organizations, using this stuff with anger right now. And then, and at first they don't expose it to internal data, just use it as an internal safe productivity tool. And people are going nuts, but slowly they're introducing internal data to the system. So they know what boundaries it has. And so, yeah, it's safe places.
Perfect, Dean. There's a couple of things in your answer there I picked up on, and I'm going to take an abstract question around and bring back to Peter on that. And just in terms of, the human-centric approach, so I'm, Dean talked about the onboarding process and giving a new starter or, the new, volunteer, person access to the right people, the right systems, the right controls. In terms of that, creating that environment and culture of collaboration and empathy while keeping that human-centered focus. How do you see that, Peter, evolving? From a Mission Australia perspective, and from your side, how can AI actually keep the human at the centre, but also enable them?
Good question. I think we've got some automation in place for some of the onboarding pieces, which I can see us tying in with AI and with, as we probably before, I call it augmented intelligence, and trying to look at how we streamline that through. And I see, as I said, employee experience I see as being a critical piece for NFPs, because many of us, particularly in the community services spaces, are never going to replace the face-to-face support that we provide clients, because it's about helping people at the time of need. So we're never going to replace that. But what we are going to do potentially is allow our workers, our caseworkers, our critical people to become way more efficient at doing this. So get rid of a lot of the hygiene roles, get rid of give them more information at the point of need. So when they're actually going to work with a client, they get more information sitting up in front of them so they can help. To be able to automate some of the back end pieces that they don't really need to do, to be able to create better search for them, better chat interaction, so that the support is better. So it's a lot of those things that I think that we really generate a lot of use for it. Out of that, I believe will evolve more client-centric pieces over time. But I really think it's important that we build out our knowledge first. And I think it's, there's all sorts of promises in AI and automation and all those sorts of components. But we do have to step carefully, because you're only one breach away from the next disaster. And I think that's something that, as a CIO, I keep firmly in the back of my mind, because I know how easy it is to have a data breach, as most tech leaders do. And we've got to be really careful. But if we are really careful and we take those measured steps, there's an incredible promise out of this that I think we want to try and leverage. And it's about using partners like Microsoft and others like ServiceNow and other tools that are coming in, platforms that are coming in with it, inherently built in, but also with the partners like Antares and others who can help us leverage that a bit more as we build that out. So I think that's where it's going. I think that's how we have to look at it. Let's not jump in boots and all and start, using ChatGPT for everything, because you will get into trouble if you're not careful, in my view anyway.
That's a very, very, very good point. Some very salient points, Peter, on the topic. And I think my takeaway is that you're looking at it from that point of view of how do you enable your staff, your frontline workers, your volunteers to have the tools they need to be more effective, to have less mundane tasks and tasking, so they can focus on where they can add the best value. And especially in that sense of NFP, which is so direct to the people that need that assistance in times of dire need, and be it in other ways, making sure that they can provide the best service possible in those times without having to worry about where to find information, where to go for certain things, what's the process, what's the protocol, and having to spend a lot of time in the back office when they should actually be out there making a difference on the ground, driving real change for the investment that you can put into them and return back to the community. So,
yeah, if I could add to that as well, like the two areas where I see where Microsoft's doing work that I think are really important to a lot of NFPs and community-focused organisations is it's definitely in that front line, whether the front line be in the call centre, in the contact centre, and that's an area where there's it's potentially already digital, and so my argument has always been the best person for you to have on the phone is the person who has 20 years experience with the organisation. But no organisation puts a person with 20 years or more, or I don't know, that's an arbitrary number, but an immense amount of experience on the phone. You generally got much, lower paid sort of people potentially, right? Because it's just it's a quantity thing. There's the balance of economics there. And unfortunately, when it comes to what we're trying to do, we do have to deal with economics. And so how do you give what I refer to as sort of situational superpowers to people who are day one on job? And in some cases, they're very nuanced. You get it. I'm sure some of the NFP, the people on the call, working in industries where you've got to be very careful about what you say and the way you handle the calls, both in an EQ and an IQ sort of point of view, right? And so, and the call center approach Microsoft has in our call center product, yeah, it does. It augments that human. It's able to listen to both sides of the conversation, provide recommendations on what the agent should be saying to the client or the caller, and also give a measurement of how that person on the other end is actually feeling. It's like, it sounds like this person's under distress, or even pick up nuances that someone on, read between the lines a bit. This sounds like it could be a domestic violence situation, and you should be asking for extra help on this call, right? This is that one chance you get to save somebody's life. But also, my partner's a nurse, and I sort of think of, the best place to care for people is not in a hospital, it's in their own home. But you can't have all the resources of a hospital in a home. You can't have all the knowledge there. And so by having, augmentation in the field where that carer can be the best possible human carer, but has a little earpiece or something that is able to say, ask the client, when the last time was they ate, last time they went to the bathroom, last time they rested, how they felt over the last day, while you're taking temperatures and reading the temperatures out, which are being recorded in real time. It's a bit of a futuristic sort of scenario where people just go out in the field looking like they've got nothing but themselves and can be the best possible human and can be extremely personalized and, should have taken 3 medications this morning, make sure that pill box is up to Tuesday or whatever. So there's those types of things that can be very, very, very procedural as well. So I can see a lot of possibility there, and organisations are starting to play with that.
Very, very good takeaways, Dean, and good insight as well. And I think you're right, the persona of how that interactive assistant works with the person, the tone of voice being used, the context of the situation that needs to happen. AI's made large advancements in that space to understand what is almost situational awareness and contextualization in that space. And we've seen it since the early adoption of bots that we were developing many years ago, where you're looking at
Qbot. Yeah,
it's good old Qbot, trying to build those tone of voice and personas and understand the moments of need of what is a person coming to you for, and are they in a rush? Are they in a panic? Do they need to really get a question and answer done really fast? What might they be thinking? So you can actually build that contextual empathy into the solution. And now we see that AI can bring a lot of that and sense. We've seen it happen through, public social media, sentiment analysis and those things. All of that's now come out. And I think Dean prefaced the webinar at the beginning saying, it's not new. It's been with us, and it's been in Netflix, and it's been in our Spotify, and it's been in so many different areas of different bots and things that we've used over the years. It's just now coming together in a way for NFPs to really leverage it in a meaningful way that can actually drive real value back to the services. And to your point around nursing, Dean, I know that we're dealing with a lot of use cases around patient times, up times after surgery, recovery times in that aged care, palliative care, and private health space around if a patient is up and walking within so many hours of having surgery, they're more likely to recover better. And that sort of data is all being captured, and then it's being looked at from a medication, from an activities, from a check-in point of view. So you're right around sometimes the best care is given at home, but if there are automated solutions which help check in on those people and remind and make sure those things are there, the data backs it up to say that the outcomes for those sorts of patients are far better and deliver better results, generally for long-term recovery than those that are sort of left. So it's back to Peter's point around how do you provide more services with less, and it's not really replacing the people you've got with a robot. It's about actually providing the ability to have more interactions and go farther and wider on that. So I think that's a very, very good topic overall that probably the sector for NFP could look at in terms of, where we can see the advancements happening over the years, but also where they can make real world difference today. On those particular use cases, and so something you touched on around the human side of it, Dean, as well, I wanted to come back around to that and just pose the question to you: what are the reasons that people are looking at from a numbers perspective? Why are leaders looking at AI, and what are the reasons they're looking at implementing that AI? You mentioned briefly, albeit tongue in cheek, around robots replacing humans. and I'll sort of come back to that loop because it's always a fear-mongering conversation that we're on the dawn of the matrix, right? We're all going to be harvested and our energy is going to be used to power robots and machines, and we'll live in this society. So let's sort of get to that sort of chase around, what are the numbers, what are the reasons, and what are you seeing from your side?
Yeah, let's just sort of put a supporting sort of information on the screen there. Look, number one, I suppose the top line is it's a productivity thing. It's doing more with less. It's all the research, like the area you're sort of asking the question about is, what are people expecting it to do? Well, it sort of comes down to what are they trying to get through today, and most of it is, how do they spend less time sort of on the grind of process and more time. And again, in particular, I'm very passionate about sort of NFPs, out there in the community in most cases. You don't want to, you want to be spending less money on the operations and less time on the people in the operations and more time in being productive. And that comes out in all the data that we have around the conversations and the research we conduct with different organizations. And mostly what we're sort of seeing with Gen AI, like again, AI, it's not new. When it comes to very, very specific applied AI use cases, in the past, we got some good results, in some cases, fantastic results, with vision systems and things like that. The difference with Gen AI is it's both generative in that you give it a very small amount of information as far as a human, and it provides you with an immense sort of response, right? Whether that be a complete quantity of a heap of research for you to do further, or actual output, actual content. But it's quite generalized as well. Like what we find is that the scenarios we see for financial services and the scenarios we see for education are the same scenarios we see for NFP with Gen AI. It's all, how do I understand the nature of this contract? Like, what Peter was referring to before. That's the 20-page or I don't know how long contract, or maybe a whole batch of contracts. What's the difference between this one and this one and this one that someone signed? Has anyone modified it between this time and this time? What are the things I need to understand? I think what they're also after is things that they didn't see before. And what we're seeing is the AI tooling, both before Gen AI and Gen AI, is providing us with points of view that we didn't think of. And so from the people who are using the tools to create images, like creatives, they're saying, give me a duck with a rocket pack on or something like that. I don't know, whatever the marketing campaign is, right? They're trying to supercharge a duck. But then it gives an image that they thought, geez, I wouldn't have drawn it like that, but that's interesting. Or maybe they generated 10 and they took one and went, I'm going to take aspects of that and make my own work. And so there's that sort of serendipity that can happen that takes you down a path you wouldn't have otherwise went. So it gives people who don't have a lot of time for creativity, inspiration and creativity in that instance. What we also see is that when you're looking at large data sets, you start to see things you didn't see before because you are not the one bored combing through the data manually. In case of Darwin Harbour, the fisheries, they're using AI to count fish, because you're not going to put a person in Darwin Harbour with all the crocs around. You're not the top of the food chain, right? And so they typically just get GoPros and record hours and hours and hours and hours of fishing footage, and then they get an intern to count it. The data that they got from the intern was not as reliable because they're interns. They didn't know all the fish species. They possibly double counted fish. AI doesn't. It individually identifies each fish, even of the same species. It can tell the difference. And the AI saw fish they didn't know existed in Darwin Harbour. They didn't even know were there. And so AI was able to see further in that instance. That was a very applied case, of course. But the Gen AI is much more general and it's very approachable. And so in the short term, giving people access to it very soon produces outcomes very soon in productivity. The challenge is getting people to use it and having the right expectations from it as well, that it is just like your mate, sometimes can let you down. That's nice. I love it. So.
And I'm going to probably then probe you on that a little bit further, Dean, just around, what are the pitfalls? What goes wrong? So, when we're relying on something to categorize, an image, tell me more about what this thing I've heard hallucinations and what sort of, we can run into in terms of errors when it's, left, how would I say, like any child or any mate, your reference, unsupervised next to your bar fridge.
Yeah, look, interesting metaphor. I'm just going to show you a little bit of content, a bit of foundational knowledge. I like to not give you the answer. I'd rather help you to have a baseline of understanding. Like no one should, go into something not knowing and make a decision. You should give yourself a bit of basic information and then make your decision, right? And so I'm trying to give some foundational knowledge and pun intended, Gen AI is based on these foundational models. And this is a semi-technical view that you see in front of you. But put simply, the way I talk about foundational models is just like everybody on this call, from the day you were born until this very moment, you were generating a foundational model in your brain. And every moment from here on, you respond to the world based on that model, as great and as flawed as it might be. There's experiences in your life you'd wish you hadn't had that were very valuable. And there's experiences you've had in your life that you absolutely enjoyed, but might not be very good for the next step in life. And so, you can get very philosophical about this, but keep in mind that the way generative AI is working is a lot like the autocomplete text, that predictive text on your phone, in that every next word that it creates is based on everything that came before and the statistical probability, and I'm simplifying this, the statistical probability of what the next thing should be, right? And so if you ask a question, every, robot may not injure each individual word, it's working out what the next one will be based on everything that came before. And it's a statistical probability. And so as a result, getting back to that sort of, that slide of, foundational generative AI models they're not intelligent. They're just got lots and lots of data and they work out what the next obvious thing is. They try to be very helpful. They think you've asked a question and it's their job to give you the next thing. In some cases, the next thing might not be very useful. They're not deterministic. Every time you ask them, the way the technology works, the immensity of the technology means that we can't give an answer accurately quickly. And so therefore, every time it gives an answer, it can be different. And it's not intentional. This is just a tool that we gave a job of working out what the next thing is. And so that hallucination you referred to there before is an artifact of autocomplete just going too far, effectively, if you make sense. Some of you may have seen memes online where people play an autocomplete game, that predictive text game, where they say, from now on, only answer my text message to you using autocomplete, go. And then it's go next. And eventually you get something quite humorous or maybe completely shameful. I don't know. And so, look, the first answers are quite good. What we find is, if you just keep asking questions over and over and over again, it can actually confuse it. And you can start to create contradictions in what you say that creates contradiction in what it outputs. It does. If it looks like it's contradicting itself, it doesn't know that. It's just giving the next best thing based on what's happened so far. So, and that's a hallucination.
Perfect. I'll just pause you there, and I'll probably put it to Peter, just in terms of, organisations, other NFPs looking at embarking on this journey. From your business context, what should you consider when it comes to this around your missions and goals, and that journey of AI adoption? What does it look like from a consideration perspective? What advice would you give?
Well, I think certainly most of us are probably going to take a slightly more conservative approach in some areas, because the risks or the impacts of getting it wrong may be quite significant. And so one of the key things that we want to make sure we don't do is impact one of our clients, because they're already having a tough time by definition of the fact that they're one of our clients. Adding insult to injury of someone who's already in need is just not something that we ever want to do. So we will always take a slightly more conservative approach in some of those areas where it might interact with clients or might impact clients. I think from a perspective of internally with our employees, we're obviously going to put up some guardrails and obviously provide some recommendations. So I've always said to people, do not take anything that AI gives you blindly. Always just check it and question it. Always try to understand why it's coming from. Always try to look for those unconscious bias. Is there an unconscious bias in there somewhere? Is it giving you all these results that are perhaps non-inclusive because it's being fed data from a particular source? Now that's harder to do when you're leveraging tools from other products, but it's still something I think we have to look at and continually challenge ourselves when it comes to the outputs of these tools. But that's no different to the outputs of non-AI based tools. Whenever you're looking at the output of some sort of tool that you're using for reporting purposes, you still got to check the data and make sure that the output makes sense. Same thing here. It's just that it's becoming, there's a tendency to just trust it because it's AI, it's artificial intelligence, or it's intelligent. It's not. And you still got to check it and test it. But I think the gains are definitely worth taking the time and being aware of it.
Very, very interesting insight, Peter. And anything to add to that, Dean, around your perspective from the Microsoft suite?
Yeah, look, what we sort of see is the more you just try to be very generalized and just sort of say, I just want the one-eyed AI to do everything. That's just not going to work. It's like, general AI, as general as this stuff is, in that anyone can sort of rock up to it and ask an arbitrary question that, and get a result which is quite compelling and useful. That sort of only goes so far. And so applying that across your whole organization is generally not going to work. What we find is when you really target given scenarios, you know what outcomes you need from it, you know what the data set is, you can ground it. That's the terminology we use with generative AI to pull it back and constrain it and put it on a leash, I suppose. We ground it and say, in this scenario, you're not to provide answers about this. You're not allowed to use data from this location. You're not allowed to do this. And it's actually quite intuitive the way the tooling works. It is literally what I'm saying right now is the way you talk to the generative AI models. You say, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that, not allowed to do this. But then you test it for the scenario to make sure it sits within the guardrails, because there's this concept of jailbreaking out there where people think of interesting things to say to try to get it to break out of that grounding, right? And that's why, you couple every system with safety. And I was making this joke, I think, Peter, you might have been on a previous call where we were chatting. It's like, I looked at my manual for my dishwasher about a month or so ago, and there's like 3 pages of safety information, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I never knew I could get myself into such a bind with my dishwasher, right? And so we don't have a manual that provides all these sort of guardrails, on how to. That doesn't mean I can't use a dishwasher. It just means that here's the things to be considerate of. And so it's good to start to form those within an organization as, both policies and guardrails, like there's hard and they're soft. Generally I wouldn't be putting generative AI straight, into client-facing situations without a lot of grounding and testing. Internally, however, where, it's the system's in control, and so people on the call within your organization say, hey, we're going to turn on Copilot, going to turn on Gen AI. Here's your playbook. Okay, check everything it says. Make sure that the answer it gives is correct. But yes, you can go and create a 1,000-word proposal very, very quickly, and you've got that part done. Now you just review it, because I tell you what, the first draft is always the hardest for me.
Very salient point. And as we come up on the hour, I'm just noticing that we're sort of coming up on time. There's no questions in the chat, so not certain if anyone from the audience has any quick questions. If not, what we might look to do is we'll send you out a follow-up. If there's any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to take those questions offline and come back to you with any other information as well. So if there's anything there that you feel relevant, please feel to reach out when we do contact you for some follow-up advice. And I'd like to thank Dean and Peter for joining me today on the Antares Transformation Series, focusing on AI and how AI is transforming the NFP sector. Thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. It's been informative. Hopefully all of you out there found it very, very interesting as well. Good takeaways for me as well, good learnings. And by all means, feel free to reach out. And we wish you a good Thursday afternoon. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you.